Today I'm reviewing an 8,000 square foot tropical sanctuary home in Coconut Grove, Miami. This is a really cool space that I think you're going to love, and I've got a lot to say about it. If you watch through this and like the way I approach spaces and want to get my eyes on your own home before you buy, sell, or renovate, the link is in the description. But for now, let's take a look at this home. So you approach the house through the thick canopy of Coconut Grove with these big oak trees, banyan trees, and right away you notice how the house sits in relation to those trees. Because the house doesn't dominate the site, it actually works around the trees that were already there. And the lot is deep and it was completely undeveloped before this, so the trees are mature and they're everywhere. And so the architecture really had to bend around them, and that's exactly what we see here. Now, the house is built on 2 levels, but it's actually flipped because most homes put the living spaces on the ground floor and the bedrooms upstairs. But here it's the opposite. And so the bedrooms, the office, and the private rooms are grounded on the garden level, while the kitchen, dining, and living areas rise into the treetops on the upper floors. And so it's definitely unconventional, but it makes total sense when you see it because the social spaces are elevated and bathed in light, and because they're framed by the foliage, you feel like you're sitting in the canopy. Now, the ground floor here is tucked beneath this massive cantilevered upper volume, so there's this sense of compression as you approach the home. And what you see are white stucco walls, floor-to-ceiling glass, and these vertical timber screens that wrap the facade. The timber itself is dark and weathered, and it runs in these tall slats that filter light and create privacy without making the home feel closed off. And then this upper level cantilevers pretty dramatically over the lower floor. And so it's bold, but it's also balanced, and the overhang provides shade and shelter, and the white roof here contrasts with the darker timber and the greenery surrounding this place. But the thing that really catches your eye here is this screen system that's wrapping the upper level. It was all inspired by palm fronds, and the screens are made of thin, overlapping slats that are arranged in this geometric diamond pattern, and because they're angled and layered on top of each other, they create this really nice light effect inside. But from the outside, they add texture, depth, and a bit of a sense of movement to the home. So I really like that the screens aren't just decorative, but they're also functional because they're providing shade, they reduce heat gain, and they're also creating a ton of privacy without blocking views or ventilation from inside. And so the house avoids being a glass box by layering these slatted panels over the windows, so you get all the light and openness, but you still have a sense of intimacy. And then the pool runs all the way along one side of the home and really emphasizes the length of the lot. It's got this pale stone coping that matches the stone on the patio and the roof line of the home, and honestly it just feels really elegant here. The way it tucks underneath the home and kind of ties the 2 sides of the home together. I think it was a great choice here, and it looks really striking with all the greenery around. It's kind of set up like a luxury resort in a sense, but here in Coconut Grove, it works really well. All right, now when you step up from the entryway, you land in the living room of this home, and it sits on the upper level, kind of elevated into the canopy. And the first thing you notice in here is the light coming in from outdoors, because the light is everywhere. It's pouring through this floor-to-ceiling glass that wraps the wall. It's filtering through those geometric palm frond screens outside, and it's casting these diagonal striped shadows across the floor and the furniture. And the light is going to be shifting constantly as the sun moves because of those screens, and so the whole room feels like it's alive. Now, the ceiling here is just stark white with a couple brass lighting fixtures hanging down, and then the floor is polished concrete, so it's this pale, smooth gray, and it's going to feel really cool underfoot here, which is going to be nice, especially on those hot Miami afternoons. And the ceiling isn't particularly high, but because the furniture all sits low, it makes the ceiling feel higher than it is. And they've done something kind of interesting in here, which is separate 2 distinct conversation zones. So it's a bit unusual, and it kind of makes the space feel a bit like a hotel lobby, because you can either sit over there, or you can sit here, but you're not sitting in both places at the same time. There's no connectivity between them, aside from the fact that they're spatially right next to each other. But with that said, I do really like the color palette in here. It's very soft, very natural. I guess the strongest pop of color that we've got in here are these 2 like deep rust colored chairs here, which look really good. And then even the painting on the wall, which is this really nice gradient, is still using natural tones with this earthy orange, blending into more of a sea blue. So overall, I do like the living room, but separating it into 2 distinct sections like this was just an odd choice. Because if you've got everyone hanging out in one space, just you and the family, then of course you're going to want to be just in one of these zones. So they're always going to gravitate to one or the other. And One of these areas will get used heavily and one of them won't, even though they're right next to each other. Or if you've got a lot of people here, then they kind of have to self-segment into two different conversation zones because not everyone is in the same space. Instead, if they had just got rid of these two benches in the center, which are essentially just creating a bit of a psychological barrier between the two conversation zones, which are distinguished by the two large rugs. If they had got rid of those and used one extra large rug, or they can still have the two here, but just orient the furniture in such a way that it feels like it's all one big zone. So that would just help people to connect more easily, to brush shoulders if you're having a party here, and I think it would have been a smart move. But now let's move to the kitchen, and I've got to say, they did a really nice job in the kitchen here. They've got the same polished concrete floors that we saw in the living room, but there's a ton of space in here. So huge kitchen island with this beautiful marble, lots of storage space, both in these dark oak cabinets that we've got here, but also all the storage inside the island and the drawers underneath the counters all the way around. So there's a huge amount of space to cook, to host people, to make drinks, anything you want to do here, you can do it in this kitchen. But beyond that, the color palette is super nice as well. Continuing the same neutral palette that we saw in the living room, but here it looks really striking because of the use of the dark wood, which is just such a nice contrast to the white marble and the neutral on the floors, but then also all the green that they've got around here, right? I said, this house is essentially elevated into the canopy, and it doesn't show any more clearly than what you see here. You are in the trees, and so everywhere you look is just green. And this is so special. It's a really unique experience to have a kitchen, or have any room, frankly, that is quite literally in the trees. And one thing I really love is that they've added a lip on the island here so that they can tuck in these stools and turn this island into an entertainment zone. So if someone's cooking, or maybe you've got a chef cooking, you've got people over here for a Saturday afternoon, right? Everyone's having a drink, having a good time. That's one way to use this space, but you can also, for breakfast in the morning, a morning coffee, whatever the case may be, this is the perfect spot for a quick drink, a quick meal, sitting here at the island with this beautiful, tree canopy outdoors. I love it, and they really nailed it with this. But I also want you to notice that there's almost no color in this kitchen, yet it still feels so vibrant. And there's a couple of reasons for that. Number one, the really dark wood is like a color on its own, right? Very rich tones. And so you don't need any other sort of color here. This alone, contrasting against the floor, the countertops, these hanging white pendant lamps, this is enough to give you contrast and visual interest in a space like this. But more importantly, they've got so much color out the windows with all this green that putting more artificial color into the kitchen would just feel cheap. So they made the right choice here by keeping the palette neutral and soft and letting nature do its work. Okay, now let's move to the dining room, and I've got to say, this is one of the nicer dining rooms I've seen in quite a while. It's definitely a formal dining space that you could absolutely host business leaders, celebrities, whoever you've got coming to a home like this. And keep in mind, this is in Coconut Grove, Miami, a very wealthy neighborhood. So if you're friends with those types of people, you can absolutely host them here confidently. But also, it's such a warm, inviting space at the same time. And for some of the same reasons that we already talked about. All the rich wood on the walls and ceiling, this enormous rug. I mean, look at the size of this thing. This has got to be one of the biggest rugs I've seen in a very long time. And I might add, it's the right size for a dining table of this scale. Maybe it could be a little shorter on the ends. They really went for it here. But if you put a rug that's significantly smaller than this, it's just going to look like a napkin, right? So they nailed it with this. Beautiful lighting overhead for when you're having those late night dinners. It's just executed so well. And this massive window on the one side here that's letting in a ton of natural light. So this place is good for breakfast meetings, lunches, dinner parties, all of it. You can do it all in here without feeling overly stiff. This is a room that feels both elegant and relaxed at the same time, which is a really difficult combination to pull off. Now, after you're done eating, maybe you want to bring people to a bit more of a cozy seating area, and that's what this sitting room is perfect for. It's got similar furniture to what we saw in the living room with this deep rust sofa, this boucle chair, and an Eames chair as well, but it also really integrates perfectly with the outdoors because you can actually just slide these windows all the way open and step right outside. But before we go out there, there's a couple couple interesting design elements in this room here. First of all, this is a really interesting chandelier. I'm a little skeptical about how well it's going to actually move light around the room, since it seems to be just these 3 bulbs aimed in different directions, but nevertheless, it looks good and it totally fits the style of this room. The second thing that I'm not certain about is this big piece of art on the wall. I kind of like it, but I also kind of feel like it looks like a massive eyeball, and so I don't know if I would be comfortable having that watching over me all the time. I might have to turn it around or something at some point. So I don't know, tell me what you think in the comments, but I'm not certain about that piece. But if we step out the doors here, then they've also got this beautiful terrace space. There's a small dining setup under this umbrella here and a few other places to sit. And so it does seem like this would be a nice place to hang out in the evenings. But my question is, would you ever realistically come here instead of being next to the pool? I'm not convinced that you would. I really think the better and more obvious place for this setup would have been right next to the pool, because then you can have that Miami poolside vibe that people are looking for. But having it here in a little bit of a corner of the property, definitely provides some privacy, but I'm just not convinced that people would come all the way here to sit down and use these spaces. I get the feeling that they probably don't get used nearly as much as they otherwise would. Because remember, every area of your property has to have utility. And especially when we get into luxury properties like this one, where they have a lot of square footage and a lot of different nooks that you could use, the question you need to be asking yourself is, what specifically will I use this area for? So if you're buying a place like this, you should look at the different areas of the home and ask yourself, what will I use this room for? What will I use this part of the yard for? And if you don't have a good answer, then the real answer is probably nothing. So you'll just have empty rooms in the house that you furnish and clean and all that, but you never actually use. And this is why I was mentioning this earlier with the living room. When you've got essentially 2 distinct seating zones right next to each other, one of them will naturally get used significantly more. It might be the one that's closer to the kitchen just for convenience. It might be the one that has the more comfortable chairs. There could be other reasons for why one gets used and one doesn't. But one of them will definitely get used more than the other. And then you'll wonder, why do we have this extra space? And so with a spot like this, I don't know how they use the house here. Maybe they use this space all the time. But I get the feeling that they would use it a lot more if it were right next to the pool. Now, I understand that because the bedrooms are on the lower level, maybe they don't want this next to the bedrooms because it could be disturbing or something like that. That could be a reason to have it here. But for most people, you're going to want to have this kind of a setup, a social setup where you can spend time outside with friends next to the pool. I mean, that's the whole point of living in Coconut Grove, right? It's not to sit here. It is nice here, right? They're surrounded by greenery, but at the same time, it's not nearly as nice as having that real lush jungle vibe that they've created specifically around the pool that they're just not utilizing right now. Now, as for the bedrooms and the other spaces on that ground floor, we actually don't have many photos of them, but as you saw before, the pool runs essentially the entire length of the lower level, and what they have on the lower level is more or less just a long hallway that connects to all the different rooms. So they don't have a large volume of space down there with, a central room where all the bedrooms are sitting off of. It's more kind of like a hotel style in that sense, right? A long hallway, bedroom, 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 and then the pool in front. So really, the entertaining and social spaces of this home are the ones we already saw on the upper level. So what can we learn from this home? Well, I think there are a couple big lessons here. Number one is the importance of injecting warmth into your space. I just looked at another property today in Australia, which is so beautiful, but it's completely lacking warmth in the kitchen and dining room. And as a result, it left the home feeling a little soulless. But here, the kitchen was wrapped in the beautiful greenery of the canopy of the surrounding trees and all the dark oak on the cabinetry, which gives it such a strong, inviting personality. And then they carried all that through into the dining room with the dark oak, the greenery outside, and that enormous rug that really frames the room and makes you feel like you belong. So if you're redesigning your own kitchen or dining room, don't forget to make those spaces feel warm, because the kitchen is the heart of the home, and if it doesn't feel good, then the rest of the home can never make up for it. The second lesson here is the importance of giving every space utility. The double conversation zone in the living room is a super easy fix, but having the outdoor furniture isolated from the pool area was just a bad choice. They could have created such a fun social atmosphere for spending time with family and friends, but They just skip that, and I think it's a big miss. But most importantly, what really captivates me about this home is how well they integrated with nature. As you saw, they have so much beautiful greenery here that it really becomes the soul of the home. And when you have a setup like this, you don't need to say much indoors. There was hardly any color anywhere in this home, other than that Eye of Sauron art piece, but it still felt vibrant and full of life. So even if you don't live inside of a tree canopy like they do here, think about how you can inject some greenery into your own home to give it that same lively feeling. Just adding a tree like this one behind me, or a small plant like the one I've got here, can make a really big difference to the way your home feels. And it's really just such an incredible way to elevate your room and give it that extra designer touch. So if you're buying, selling, or renovating a home in the next 12 months and you want to get my eyes on it before you make a big time commitment, the link is in the description. And if you want to see another gorgeous home that I absolutely love, check out this video up here. It's a good one. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the comments.